So why are the mechanics of human perception more a metaphysical issue than a physical or psychological sort of brain chemistry issue? Well, that's because what really gives perception power is emotions behind it. If you told me something was going to happen to me that I wouldn't like, and I really felt an emotion, say fear, behind that, it gives it awesome power. But if you told me it was happening and I really didn't feel it, it's going to be quite impotent. So all these tools of implanting that we've talked about, of implanting certain distorted perceptions, are really backed up by triggering into people's emotions. And we've talked about people that are emotionally vulnerable, have certain emotional triggers, and we've talked about linking, how we tend to link things into emotional triggers, how things like peer pressure and social conformity link into emotional feelings, and so these tend to be what give it the power. Now, it's important to appreciate that all modern humans carry with us residual emotions. These are not the oversimplistic energy blocks that you read about on the web that you can just, empty a chakra every now and again and they're gone. These are the emotional residuals of energy residuals of situations we've had in our lives. Because what we tend to do is we tend to try and get over things. We tend to rationalize the situation or get over the situation. So we forgive people and we try to forget about it and we try to, quote, move on, unquote. So the memory of the situation, the mental conflict of the situation tends to resolve. That does not resolve the energy. In fact, that causes a problem because that energy no longer has a trigger, a mental trigger to remind us that it's still there. And we see that as very healthy, but it's very unhealthy because we need that emotion gone. So what tends to happen is later down the line, something else will come along and trigger that old emotion. This is why we tend to go around in circles with things and the same old issues come up that we, quote, think, unquote, that we've got over because we've mentally rationalized or reconciled what happened. We've forgiven the person, we've sort of, quote, moved on, unquote. But what we didn't do is deal with the actual energy because we are only taught about thinking and mental concepts. We aren't generally given metaphysical tools to release the energy. Now, had we done it the other way around and released the energy, we wouldn't have had to do any of the mental reconciliation. The next time we came to a similar situation, we would not have the old triggers, we would not repeat the patterns. And so what happens is, the way people are taught about ourselves in the modern world means we all accrue a sort of emotional minefield of triggers. It's not how we're meant to be, but it's how we tend to work nowadays. And so a lot of these issues are things to do with disempowerment, relationships, belonging, validation, all these sort of things. And we're told it's, quote, normal, unquote. It might be normal, but it's not natural. And a large part of my work is teaching people things like this and teaching them how to defuse that minefield. Well, that minefield plays a big part in perception because when we're triggered, when one of these old issues or wounds is triggered and we get very emotional, as I explained before, that destabilizes the physical part of the body, which destabilizes chemistry, which destabilizes the thing which depends on body chemistry, which is the brain, and our perception tends to go all over the place. So as we're well aware at a basic level, people who are angry or really upset have a really hard time standing back from it and being rational. So our tendency to mentally reconcile situations, well, I'm over that, I've dealt with it, I've forgiven John, he's apologized, I'm over it, is often very illusory because the chances are there's something in there emotionally, some emotional residual, that because we aren't taught metaphysical tools, we won't find it until the next John 5 years down the line comes along, triggers a similar issue, and we suddenly get wildly emotional and we wonder why. That's because the old emotions add to the current ones, and we just build up more and more. So what manipulators tend to want to do is to trigger these little mines on the minefield, and tend to find out what the triggers are. A lot of them tend to be very common: relationships, belonging, validation, being loved, being cared for, being respected. And so whilst it's normal, it's not natural. But they can be used against us in that way. And so in order to have a defense against being manipulated, and in order to become objective, the first thing we must do is be brutally honest about when we're emotionally upset or angry or sad or fearful, and recognize that we can't be objective in those states, and that in an ideal world you come and see somebody like me and I'll teach you how to get rid of that. But that's beyond the scope of this book. That aside, if we can be brutally honest about our emotional triggers and recognize that when we are triggered, when we do have something that's very close to our hearts, like rejection in relationships or something like that, we can't be objective. So the more we struggle to be objective, the more we won't be able to. So recognizing that and having a level of brutal honesty about this issue always triggers me is going to help us not fall for what we're being fed at that time, friends, family, whatever, or any sort of manipulation, attempt at manipulation. Other important things are concepts we call trust and belief. Trust and belief are concepts, and they are by definition flawed. Here's why. You can't be objective if you use belief. Objective people use evidence, not belief. They suspend belief of anything. They don't want any sort of belief. They simply want to sample the evidence in front of them. The same way with trust. Rather than invest trust that everybody is a good person until they prove otherwise, and simply set ourselves up for guaranteed disappointment, don't invest trust in anybody. Just be open to experience everyone over time as they demonstrate themselves to you. Not what they say, but what they do. So just have a blank sheet of paper. Don't, so to speak, just have a blank sheet of paper. Don't trust and not trust unless people have given you absolute evidence that they are going to let you down. Just start with just an open situation and let them gradually fill that in over a period of time. Don't go on what they say. Let people prove it to you. Because part of manipulation is convincing you, triggering you emotionally to listen to what people say. And inspire an emotion of feeling comfortable. That's part of the mechanisms of trying to change that world model that this person is a trustworthy person. Don't do that. Just allow people to demonstrate over a period of time where they're coming from, irrespective of what they say. Smile sweetly, look at them and go, yeah, okay, fine. I'll allow you to show me that over time. That way, and without using opinions or trust, you can gradually build up this real world map, this time from real evidence of how people treat you. And so then your world model becomes real based on real stuff. But using concepts like trust and opinion isn't going to work. So when you go on the web, recognize most of what's on social media and most of what you'll find on Google are not facts but opinions. These things are driven by popularity and trend. So what you'll find when you do searches or surveys and things on the web is what most people like or most people believe. So don't recognize the web as a solid research tool just based on number of results or what's popular. That's just what's popular, and most often what's popular is not what's real. If you're going to discover things, do some real solid research. Find out some solid sources of information and go get the information. A million opinions can't do anything, but one solid fact from a creditable source can. So again, in the absence of that, don't believe anything. Just wait for the evidence to appear. That doesn't mean not trusting people, in other words, being suspicious of them. It means just being cautious and careful, and but at the same time open with everybody. So don't give them the credit and then let them run into debt. Just let them prove themselves over time. Likewise with the facts. Go to creditable sources. Don't use the web. Don't use social media, and don't go with what all your friends believe, because that is proven to be so unreliable, particularly nowadays, and particularly with things like Google that just show you what most people like and what most people believe, and not what's necessarily true. That's going to be a very healthy insulation against a lot of this stuff. Then the social pressures, the pressures to conform. Be aware of the pressures to conform. Be aware of well, I want people to like me. You don't have to sort of go out on a limb and say, I'm not going to trust anybody to all your friends. You can keep it to yourself, but try to be aware of that and try to be very, very honest about when you do feel precious to conform, and precious to fit in, and try to deal with your friends and say, well, give me a chance and I'll come to a conclusion, rather than do you believe this, don't you believe this sort of stuff, because that pressure will be there.